Okay, so we're recording again, and we need to just get something up there. So, and I have this twice because I've been cutting and pasting, and this is a decent amount of code where I really don't think I should. Really don't feel like cutting and pasting it, but I do want to maintain the linear flow of the code, so I think I might want to put this into a loop and kind of package stuff up. Um, huh. And that would also help if those were an object, if I did that. We could put something in anonymous objects and do it on the fly. Or we can just or we could just cut and paste the code 2 times, which is really ugly, and then we could can fix it later. So this is ISO memory, and then we would like copy all of this, but we would hard code at 1020. We would copy all of it and hard code at 1024 here instead. And this needs to be some type of data. So how are we going to do that? So or we could do thought that's what it is, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, it has a length as well. In that case, we know that right now it's going to be like 512 times 512 times 4, because there's 4 components per pixel, right? RGB and A. So we could like hard code that in there for now. Or we could just put it as null and then do it outside of the object. I think I might just want it null. And then okay, and then we could do and with that we could do alright, we could just have a whole bunch of like hard-coded top-level stuff, right? We could have the pixel width and the pixel height, right? And right, and right, then we know this is 512 and 512. And then we know that our bigger one is going to be 1024 by 1024. And make a little comment that it's 512 times 4. Or if you want to be really explicit, in the case that we really suck at math, right? And we say 10, like what if I said 1024 equals 512 times 16? You know, something where the comment 512 times 4 has the context of, you know, yeah, so we could put that there like that. And now we have a width and a height, and we can use those. Now, do we really need the components? We're always going to stick to 4, but I guess since we're being... So the number of components per pixel is 4. Components per pixel. Yeah, I guess we should probably have that as well. And... okay, yeah, we can have that as there. Okay. Okay. And then when we create the uint array, we don't have to hard code it like that, right? And it'll be the so ismm.pix width, and then times the height times the number of components, right? So all these multiplied by each other. And then what we can do, we can slide in some multiplication right there, and then we can just put a 1 up here, which, you know, you might not like that. But width times height times components starting with 1, or, you know, you might want to do this, you know, if that makes it easier. Or you could do it all on one line. You know, I really don't care if it's like that. It obviously is, right? Because if we remove this, then this becomes invalid because there's no operand on the left side. So, yeah, I'll do that. And then we can just we can just copy all this. I know you're looking at me being like, oh, you're doing all this stuff, and like, man, you don't have to write this twice. You could totally write a function to do this twice. Well, I already did it twice, so what extra benefit would you have to make a function doing this twice? You have to do it twice. All I had to do was cut and paste some code, and it took me like a second, right? Right, and then also, because of the way we've decided to do this, to make a function to do this twice, not only do we have to write that function, but then it's either going to take all these parameters, right? Which in case we didn't save ourselves any time, we just like nested it one deeper for absolutely no reason. Or we would have to somehow create a container for this data and a container for this data, right? And then we pass that container to a function that does this, and then call the function again and do this again, right? So in order to get that reusability, we would have to add just a lot of extra code just to get that reusability. So this is what I'm talking about when I say, like, you know, sometimes a more procedural approach can be simpler and more direct. Now, the problem with the more procedural approach is that, you know, sometimes it might seem like more code, but if you think about it, this isn't really actually more code, right? Because in order to create a function that would do this action twice, we have to now create specialized containers for all of this data. And this data, right, and thinking about like information theory, right, we have to supply all of these data points somewhere, right? So this is probably the shortest and simplest way you can do it, and you might fool yourself into thinking that, oh, if you make a function, you actually make it shorter and simpler, but I don't know, man. Anyways, I'm just ranting. So we have this code here, and we have some problems. which can be made a little bit more obvious if we align this, right? And then this is why I kind of like miss the, using the dots, because in order to see the problem, I can't see it immediately by clicking, but if I highlight this, token highlight it, I notice that that's not highlighted because, right? And then if we go Control 0, and then we do some token highlighting again, right? Now everything is lighting up as I would expect. So in this case, we're going to have to just do some visual inspection. So all pix, array width height components, array width height component, right? So we also another advantage here that you can't get from calling a function twice is we have some redundancy where visually we can go, oh, we know these blocks are basically identical except for there's one thing changed about them. So now we can look at both of them and see if they are indeed identical except for, this section here. And that gives us a little bit of redundancy to the code, and redundancy can be good because then if we see something like this bullshit, right, obviously it wouldn't be that blatant, but then we're like, huh, that's weird because these blocks should be completely complementary except there's this like asymmetry here. What's up with that, right? So I'm all for like trying to create patterns in the code so you can detect things that are going wrong, right? Now, writing tests in your code is also going to help. If you look up the halting problem, it's impossible to like write a program that can be 100% certain of its validity, right? So in the end, that means that the real validation comes down to you being able to, as a human, look at the source code and make sure that everything's correct. Okay, and what else are we screwing up here? I know. So we have to qualify this with the global data object. So we could do that, right? And that way we still get that stuff lined up. It's a little bit awkward, right? Because now we've kind of indented the beginning. But I'd say that's good enough for me. I'm happy with that. I will compromise on the formatting if it helps me see the patterns. Okay. Texture handles, creating the textures to get those texture handles back. And right now they're set to trap values up here. Okay. So the texture slot and the texture handle. Oh, and now because we've indented, we kind of lose that. Oh, and there's that. Okay, so so within this block, what do we need here? We need the width and height, and we need that actual array of data, which we haven't put anything in it yet, but, so it's like probably all zeroed out by default, maybe, so it's like black with like 0 alpha. Well, if we added some indirection, we wouldn't have to write this twice. Well, I don't know. So let's say so if we created like an array, so if we created like some type of data array, And then we had 2 objects in it, right? So there's 1 object, 2 objects, right? And then what do we need, right? We need the texture slot, we need the texture handle, we need the actual width and height. And is it actually called text width? No, it's called texture. Got it. So it's called yeah, so I have some inconsistent naming here because I realized texture handle and texture slot, pixel array, pix whatever, and like maybe that should be called text. Like these should be called texture. And now the thing is why I call them pix is because I think of them as pixels. And this part is the reason why I use text for this is because it's very specific to the OpenGL API, whereas this I mainly am going to use these values on the client side, on the CPU side, for manipulating the allocated arrays. So I could use text width and text height and things like that. But since this is the way I usually do it, I think I'll just keep it that way. Sometimes it's good just to stick to a variable name and just keep it that way and not change it. But now that I've kind of noticed that, I'm just going to make a note on the right side of my screen. Text array, text width, text height, and text com. And then I'm just going to make a note to not use these. And then we could do, yeah. Yeah, and then later I'll organize that. But yeah, I shouldn't use those if it would be better if I just don't. But it's good to know about that though. Okay, so texture slot, texture handle, the pixel width, pixels height, and then the number of components per pixel, and that's like all the stuff I need. It's like if we're going through all this effort to make this, it's like why not package it back up up here. Okay, so right, because now we're writing all this extra code and we could just replace it here. You know what, or we could just not, because let's not just take time to shorten code for the sake of shortening code, maybe. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Right, so we can have, Jesus. Okay. Texture slot, texture handle. I think that's all we need. And then we can just start copying some things. Handle. Oh, and then the array. Do we need that array of data? We do. It's right down here. It's also in the middle here. So we should probably preserve the same order, because it's going to make it a little bit easier to do some things. So we're going to put that pixel array in here as well. And then, right, and then we can just take this like that. Right, so now we got this little we got this little table of these, all the data we need to perform the operation within this scope. And then we're just gonna loop over all this stuff twice and do it twice, right? So in our data array, we're gonna do the data array dot the texture slot, and then the data array dot texture handle. All right, we already have the texture handle created outside, yeah, so we're good there. Let's see, what else? Alignment, then text image 2D. These 512s by 512s that are hard coded, we're going to use the data array. Oh, and you know what? We need an index, and then pixwidth, and do not like those commas there. Right, and then data array I dot pix height, right? And let's get rid of these. And then this is the actual, this right here is the actual data, so we'll do the data array. That's kind of ambiguous, the actual data, it's all data. But this is the, did I call it pixel array? I believe I called it pixel array, right? Yeah, pixel array. Okay, and then we can kind of clean up our alignment there, and we can throw some commas up in the front there, and delete them from these lines. Yeah, so that should be correct there, right? Yeah. So the width, and then what we can do is we can click all these parameters and make sure they're used everywhere in the code below. Make sure we're not missing anything. Looks like we've provided pixel components, but we really don't need that. Pixel components would be needed if that's where we're like creating the arrays. So we already create the arrays like way up here, so we don't need the pixel components. Now, is it are we doing ourselves a favor or disservice by removing this unused information? Well, for a fact, I know it's not going to change. Well, there is alignment, which is 4. Do I think that 4 is actually the components? Holy shit. Yeah, I think that's what that is. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. It's 4 because of how the let's go look at unpack a lot. Oh, I'm gonna start a new video.